Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever read an obituary and felt like you were just looking at, I don't know, kind of a clinical resume?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it happens all the time.
Right. You just get this totally sterile list of facts. Like someone was born here, they got these degrees, they worked this job, they retired, and then here is a list of surviving relatives.
Yeah, it's very formulaic,
Yeah,
very dry.
exactly. So today, our mission is to look at a single, incredibly unique memorial document. And we want to explore how it serves as this vital microhistory of the 20th century American middle class. We're looking at the life of Karen Kuzner.
Right.
She passed away on March 25, 2026, at the age of 82.
And it's a document that just completely throws that standard formal rule book right out the window.
It really does.
Because usually we tend to strip away all the color of a person's life, right?
Mhm.
We just try to fit them into these standard categories and chronological dates, mostly because it's, comforting and it's predictable.
Well, for sure. It's safe.
Exactly. But Karen's family just refused to do that. I mean, they proudly listed causing mischief and drinking cheap Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine right alongside her high school graduation dates.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and right alongside her very serious, brave battle with dementia.
Yeah, and before we even get into the text, we really have to talk about the physical document itself.
Yeah.
Because it is just beautiful to look at.
They're gorgeous.
The card is framed with these delicate floral borders and these soft pinks, yellows, and peaches. And there is a vibrant pink shamrock right in the mix, honoring her heritage.
Which is a lovely touch.
It is. And the whole thing is anchored by two stunning photographs. On one side, you have a picture of Karen as a young girl. She's leaning forward, looking right into the camera, and she has this intense, almost impatient ambition in her eyes.
You can really see it.
Yeah, it's a look of someone just waiting for life to start.
And then right next to it, there's a portrait of her as an older woman. She has this warm, incredibly resilient smile. You can see the miles on her, I mean, obviously, but you can also see the sheer joy she cultivated over those decades.
Which is such a powerful contrast.
It really is. You're looking at the raw potential of youth right next to the beautiful culmination of an 82-year journey.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the geography and the timeline. Because to really understand Karen, we have to understand the physical geography she inhabited. Back in the mid-20th century, I mean, geography was destiny.
It really was. The boundaries of your neighborhood basically define the boundaries of your world.
Right.
So Karen was born on February 17th, 1944. And she grew up on 79th Street in Chicago's South Shore neighborhood.
Okay.
And at that time, South Shore was this densely packed, working-class mosaic. People lived practically on top of each other, which kind of forced a certain type of intense community.
Yeah, you couldn't really avoid your neighbors.
Exactly. She attended St. Bride's Elementary, graduating in 1958, and then Chicago Vocational High School in 1962.
And she eventually moved to the east side in the early 1970s and finally settled down in Whiting, Indiana. And there's a supporting detail about this geography that, well, I think it completely changes how we should view her timeline.
Oh, yeah, the travel part.
Right. Karen never flew in an airplane.
Wow.
Never. She never learned how to drive a car either.
That's wild to think about today.
It is. Apart from these childhood bus trips she would take with her parents to see her mother's relatives up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada, she never wandered more than about 100 miles from where she was born.
When you think about that scale, I mean, a 100-mile radius over the course of 82 years, it really reframes how we think about what a full life actually is.
It really does.
Right.
Especially when you look at modern society's absolute obsession with being, like, a digital nomad.
Oh, right.
We're constantly told we need to travel the globe, backpack through Europe, or relocate across the country just to find ourselves. There's this pervasive anxiety that if you aren't constantly moving, you just aren't living.
Right. Like you're missing out.
Exactly. But Karen's life acts as this incredible counter-narrative. I kind of like to think of it as the difference between a deeply cultivated garden and a sprawling, shallow farm.
I like that.
Because you can cover thousands of acres of farmland and only ever experience one type of crop. Or, you can tend to one small garden for 80 years and experience a massive, rich, utterly fulfilling ecosystem of life.
Yeah.
She proved you don't need to leave a 100-mile radius to fully experience the world.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, her hyperlocal life maps perfectly onto the broader outward migration patterns of Chicago's working class.
How so?
Well, in the 40s and 50s, 79th Street was this bustling commercial hub. But as the decades passed, working-class families began seeking a bit more space, mostly following industrial and retail shifts.
Okay, yeah.
They migrated toward the east side and eventually down into the tight-knit, industrial-adjacent communities of northwest Indiana, like Whiting. So she didn't need to fly across the world to experience massive cultural shifts. The culture was shifting right under her feet, block by block.
Right. And because she didn't drive and couldn't easily access those big regional shopping centers, her immediate neighborhood basically had to provide everything.
Absolutely.
This created this captive, hyper-local microeconomy, which perfectly explains her resume. Reading the places she worked is literally like taking a walking tour of 20th century American retail.
It's a remarkable list. I mean, we have the Cheltenham Theater, Sears Roebuck & Co., Cohen's Department Store, Less on Drugs,
Yeah.
and Angel's R.S.
What a lineup!
Right. And in the memorial, she's specifically remembered as a hardworking, valued clerk who brought immense personality to those roles.
I do have to push back a little here, though.
Sure.
Because I look at that list of jobs and my feet ache just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're looking at grueling, low-paying, on-your-feet-all-day retail work. Are we maybe looking at this through rose-colored nostalgia glasses? Like, by highlighting these jobs with such fondness in her obituary, are we glossing over how physically and mentally hard her life actually was?
You know, that is a very fair critique. We definitely shouldn't pretend that standing behind a counter at Cohen's department store for 8 hours, just dealing with the public, was glamorous.
Right.
It was exhausting labor. But we also have to look at the sociological function of a retail clerk in the pre-internet era to understand why she is remembered this way.
You mean because they didn't have, like, algorithms telling them what to buy?
Exactly that. I mean, before next-day delivery, these neighborhood stores were the absolute social anchors of a community. The workers were the steady, reliable rhythm of American commerce.
Oh, I see.
She wasn't just ringing up a register. She was essentially the neighborhood database.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you worked at Less on Drugs, you knew who was coming in for medicine for a sick child, and you would naturally ask about that child the next week. You knew who was nervous about an upcoming job interview and needed a tie from Sears. You knew who just needed to buy a ticket at the Cheltenham Theater to escape reality in the dark for a couple hours. So remembering her in this way doesn't gloss over the difficulty of the labor. It actually restores dignity to the people who wove the social fabric of those neighborhoods.
They were really the glue that held the neighborhood together during those massive migrations.
Exactly.
And the community she anchored at work was really only rivaled by the massive cultural synthesis she curated at home, specifically at her dining room table.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the memorial details a menu that practically serves as a demographic map.
The food she cooked is a whole story in itself.
Just listen to this spread. Mostaccioli and meatballs, roasts, Polish sausage, garlic chicken, roast beef with pepperoncini, and cream puffs.
I mean, it sounds like an incredible Sunday dinner.
Right. I'm getting hungry.
But if you look at the historical context, that plate of food represents the dissolution of decades of social tension.
Wait, how so?
Well, think about early 20th century Chicago. You had these very distinct immigrant communities, Irish, Italian, Polish, and they were incredibly siloed.
Right, they stuck to their own neighborhoods.
Exactly. In the 1920s, there was intense social rivalry and friction between those groups. You stayed in your neighborhood and you ate your food. But as that outward migration we talked about happened, those neighborhoods expanded and those cultures started to blend.
Which is exactly what we see in her family tree.
Yes.
Her grandfather, John, and her father, James P. Durkin, were Irish. That's where that beautiful pink shamrock on the memorial card comes in.
Right.
Then her mother, Elizabeth Nana Zappacosta, who's from Ontario, brought the Italian influence. That gives us the mostaccioli, the meatballs, the garlic chicken, and the pepperoncini.
And then her marriage into the Kuznier family brought the Polish sausage.
It's all right there.
You literally have a massive, once frictional, global migration story ending up right there on Karen's dining room table, peacefully synthesized into garlic chicken and cream puffs.
She cooked her family's history into every meal. And speaking of that family, the tree she built around that dining table is just staggering. She married her devoted husband of 50 years, Richard Kuznier, on Valentine's Day in 1976.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, they were actually set up by a mutual friend named Keith. And from that marriage, she had 4 children: Kimberly, John, David, and Dawn.
And we really should look closely at how our family is presented in this document because it says a lot about her capacity for love.
Yes, this is a critical detail. While she loved all four of her children deeply, not all of her children grew up with Richard as their father.
Right.
The fact that the family is presented as this beautifully unified front reflects the rich, complex realities of modern family building. It wasn't just about rigid biology, it was about the chosen environment of love she created.
Absolutely.
And that environment created a massive orbit. From those four children came four grandkids, then five great-grandkids, and even a great-great-grandson, Noah.
What's fascinating here is I think we really need to pause and do the math on that. 5 living generations overlapping at the exact same time.
It's crazy.
That is demographically incredibly rare today.
It's hard to even wrap your head around. I mean, you hear about great-grandparents relatively often, but a great-great-grandson. That implies a stretch of time and a sequence of events that just feels mathematically improbable.
It requires an incredibly specific biological and societal alignment. In modern society, the trend is overwhelmingly to delay parenthood until the late 20s or 30s, which obviously widens the generational gap significantly.
Right.
To get to a great-great-grandson, you need multiple consecutive generations to have children at a younger age. But even more critically, you need immense resilience and longevity from the matriarch.
Yeah, she lived to 82.
She had to survive decades of change, basically holding that massive web of connection together through sheer force of will.
But holding that web together came with an incredibly heavy emotional toll. Karen's deep love for her family carried her through an immense amount of grief.
It did.
The document does not hide the fact that she had a difficult road. She was preceded in death by her grandfather, her father, her brother, her mother, and her mother-in-law. She carried the weight of all of those losses, which eventually culminated in her final, heaviest reality, a really serious battle with dementia.
Dementia is just a cruel systemic disease. It physically degrades the brain's networks. It dismantles executive function, meaning the brain loses its ability to plan a day, manage a schedule, or organize even basic thoughts.
That's so tough.
The person you love is still there, but the tools they use to communicate with the world are just broken down.
Yet, the memorial notes that something managed to break through that fog for Karen. Even as dementia was taking her executive function away, music survived.
Yes.
The text explicitly says she could recall lyrics to countless songs, from Bing Crosby to the Bee Gees. They even physically printed Elvis Presley's lyrics, "Love Me Tender, Love Me Dear," right on the card.
That detail about the music surviving the cognitive decline is deeply rooted in how human neurology actually functions. It's one of the most fascinating aspects of the brain.
There is a line in the text, though, that gave me pause.
Oh.
Yeah, it mentions that even sad songs brought her comfort and made her cry. I have to question this instinct from the family, because when someone you love is vulnerable, when they're battling cognitive decline and losing their grip on reality, our absolute first instinct is to aggressively protect them from negative emotions.
Right, of course.
We just want to keep them happy, calm, and safe. So why on earth would her family embrace something that made her cry? Why would a sad song bring her comfort?
This raises an important question about how we view emotional processing, especially at the end of life. We tend to think of crying as inherently bad, but to understand why a sad song is comforting, you really have to understand the neurology of emotional memory.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think of the human brain as a massive, bustling city. Dementia is like a devastating storm that sweeps in and completely shuts down the main highways. Those main highways are the pathways we use for conscious thought, recent memories, and daily functioning.
So the main roads are just blocked with debris. You literally can't get from point A to point B.
Exactly. But music processing, particularly music tied to deep emotional memory from our youth, like Elvis or the Bee Gees for Karen, doesn't use those main highways.
Oh, wow.
It's processed in older, deeper areas of the brain, like the cerebellum and the amygdala. You can think of those areas as hidden underground backroads. And because of where they're located, they're often the very last areas to be affected by the disease.
Wait, really? So the music physically bypasses the damage?
Yes. When she heard a sad song, her brain took those neurological backroads right past the cognitive damage, directly into her emotional core.
That is incredible.
So crying to a melancholic tune wasn't harmful to her. It wasn't causing her distress in the way we usually fear. It was a bittersweet release.
Right.
It was profound proof that she was still entirely there, capable of feeling the full, complex spectrum of her history. The sadness was a bridge back to herself, basically allowing her to process a lifetime of memories that she couldn't access through normal conversation.
That completely changes how I view that moment. It proves she wasn't just existing in a fog, she was still feeling the depth of her life.
Exactly.
The music gave her a voice when the words failed. Which brings us to the core theme that the family distilled all of this down to. The document clearly states everything that made Karen happy seemed to be close to her.
It is the ultimate thesis of a life lived deeply within that 100-mile radius.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about how obituaries are usually clinical resumes. We expect history to be written about the people who crossed oceans, the politicians, the CEOs who built massive empires. We're taught that scale equals importance. But when you look at the totality of Karen Kuznier's life, you realize we have it completely backwards.
The true cultural fabric of an era isn't woven in boardrooms or on airplanes.
No.
It is woven by the local retail clerks who anchor a community when everyone else is moving. It's woven by the cooks making Sunday dinners that peacefully blend immigrant heritages that used to be at war. It's woven by the resilient matriarchs holding together 5 generations of a complex, beautiful, chosen family.
It's the rebellious spirits drinking Strawberry Hill wine on a Tuesday and causing mischief.
Yeah.
The family refused to write a clinical resume because a resume just couldn't hold her. They didn't just give us the dates. They gave us the music, the menu, and the mischief. They made sure she wouldn't just be documented. She would be felt by anyone who read it.
They captured the raw essence of her humanity, which, is the greatest tribute you can give someone.
I completely agree. And I think that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you listening right now. We just spent a lot of time talking about the physical artifacts of memory. We talked about how the taste of garlic chicken or the sound of the Bee Gees triggers those neurological backroads in the amygdala, bypassing the wear and tear of time. But what about the physical objects we leave behind? Take a look around your house right now. When you are gone, what seemingly mundane item will act as an emotional time capsule for your descendants? Will it be a heavily dog-eared paperback book you read 100 times that smells exactly like you? Will it be a stained recipe card with your messy handwriting completely covered in flour? Or maybe a specific brand of cheap, nostalgic wine glass that you always used on a Tuesday? What unwritten physical artifact will perfectly trigger those hidden backroads of memory when your loved ones gather to remember you? It's something to think about as you go about your day. Take care of yourselves and maybe play a little Elvis today.